into the day with the dawn ringing in my ears. Oh, well, I tune into my TV show. No better way, I gotta get myself into gear. Let's go. Oh, and I feel good today with my wake up in the morning espresso. I feel good today. It's my feel good breakfast show.
Welcome to your midday edition of your Feel Good Expresso. We kickstart this particular Monday. I'm really excited with this because we're going to be talking about fun and video games. This is the console that we've all been waiting for, the new PlayStation 5, and that was finally released on Thursday last week. A console that starts strong and fantastic new features with a revolutionary new controller. Let's dive into the console itself with myself because, you know, I'm into gaming, and Kervin from Critical Hit, and to all the kids out there who are already on holiday, I think it's time for you to listen up, but I also think adults out there also need to hear what we have to say.
Definitely, because kids can't afford a console this expensive.
Hey, parents, we'll let you in on whether you should be looking at getting a PlayStation 5 or not. But Kervin, what is happening over here? What are we playing?
So currently we're playing Astro's Playroom. It's basically preloaded onto the PS5, and it's a little bit of a tech demo, really. It's a little platforming game and shows off all the features on the PlayStation 5's new revolutionary controller.
But before we jump straight into the controller, let's talk about the console specs a little bit. I think the controller is one of the unique selling points, and this game comes pre-installed, which is nice, so you can play the game from the box. But you're looking at, it's like just over 600 gigabytes of storage.
About 626 gigabytes of storage, internal storage. You can stick an external SSD in, not working quite yet, but they'll get there soon. Just fantastic. You can expand
it supports 4K, 120 frames a second.
120 frames per second.
Which is really great, but you need a TV to support that. Yeah. So a lot of people are going to be like, wow, those specs are great, but if you don't have a 4K TV, you can't play it, which is a bit of a problem. And obviously, you're going to have to buy a lot of new games, but it supports backwards compatibility.
It does indeed. So all your favorite games, they just can load them up. They'll play them. Some of them are actually enhanced, so they get some nice new features, nice new graphics, and it works fantastic.
It's not uniform, the enhancement, so you have to find out from. You just need to do a little bit of Googling. I had some problems when I booted this. This is my PlayStation 5, and I had a few issues with it. Like when I installed a PlayStation 5, Call of Duty is a PlayStation 5 game, but it's also got backwards compatibility. Then I really struggled with the ability to, like it booted up the PS4 instead of the PlayStation 5 version, which sucks because you want to get the controller's like benefits. But those are what I consider teething pains when it comes to new consoles.
Our console launches always have a couple of issues. So
there's something that just needs to be ironed out.
It'll be ironed out soon, don't worry.
But let's talk about the controller. You're handling it now. Do you want to show people a little bit about why it's so special and what it sets it apart from like the Xbox, for instance?
So at first glance, it looks pretty much similar to the DS4, which is the DualShock 4. A little bit of design differences, but it's inside that what counts. So inside we have this haptic triggers that gives incredible feedback. We've always had force feedback on gaming controllers, but this is far more subtle, far more nuanced. What it does is it provides different feedback depending on different situations in the game. So instead of just rumbling, you have like subtle little variations of it, resistance on the triggers. It gives you a unique and amazing experience. It's unlike anything else. It's probably the most next-gen feature of all the next-gen consoles at the moment.
Yeah, so just to give you an idea, it's hard to demonstrate this on TV, but because the motors are so advanced inside of it, little things like what Kervin's doing on the screen right now, running on sand, you can feel the sand on the controller. Or if you're playing a game like NBA 2K, which is a basketball game, when the players get more tired as they play in your match and you need to sub them out, the run trigger, which is the left trigger on NBA 2K, just is a lot harder for you to press.
Yeah.
So it makes it more tiring for you to play, which is really cool. And also with games like Call of Duty, where there is firing of a weapon, you can see things like it jitters and jumps. But it's going to be up to how different how developers handle that. So we've got a sandstorm effect in the game right now. What's happening to the controller?
When it's going in the sandstorm, the little speaker in here gives it a bit of sound as well, and the controller rumbles very slightly, making you feel the wind. You can feel the sand blowing against your character, and you can feel when you're walking a little resistance.
How is that rumble now that you are feeling different from like what the PlayStation 4's rumble was?
Previous rumble will just shake everything. Your entire hand would just vibrate. That was it. This is actually focused. It's actually
where in the controller is it focused?
So the rumble at the moment you can feel it through the base of the controller over here.
Not so much so not on the top of the controller, underneath?
It's underneath. You can feel it all over. There are motors all over this thing, and it's fantastic. Previously, it would just shake your whole hand, basically. It was not context sensitive. This is actually dependent on what's happening on screen.
Yeah, so the old controller was called the DualShock controller, just because it rumbled. This is the DualSense controller. So the actual difference is that it's more a sensory experience as opposed to like a big rumbling experience. The motors obviously are on the other side of the controller, but also on the triggers themselves. So the separate motors for each of those triggers?
Yes, they have separate motors in each trigger. It's actually a very clever implementation of how they've done it. It's very simple, but...
How does it feel in comparison to a PlayStation 4 controller?
If you're someone who's played PlayStation all their life, this will be comfortable as hell. It's really comfy, but it's that small little feedback that you get when you're pulling the triggers, when you're doing certain things, that really, really, really sets it apart.
Yeah, so this game that we're playing right now is called Astrobot. This comes built in with the PlayStation, and its primary focus is about making sure that you can feel the controller. This is a good example. So move your controller left and right. It's got the motion sensors in it. There you can see your character moving. So you steer that character into position, and then you use your left trigger to...
Your left trigger basically pulls it down, and you can fire yourself off.
Oh, wow.
When I'm pulling that trigger, it's as if I'm pulling a real spring. I can feel the resistance, the tension.
Is it pushing back against your finger?
It's pushing back against a slight little bit of vibration. It's exactly as if I was operating a real spring.
So, okay, so when it comes to PlayStation versus Xbox, and I think at some stage I need to chat to our producers. We should do a big rundown. Should we do a PlayStation versus Xbox showdown? And if you guys are on social media, please let us know what you think is the console that you're going to be getting as the next gen. What separates the Xbox Series X, which is obviously the new one, and the PlayStation 5?
So at the moment, the biggest draw card on the Xbox is really its Game Pass, which is just a massive backlog of games you get.
So Game Pass is available on Xbox?
Game Pass is available on Xbox. It's basically the big defining factor there. It's basically a subscription-based service that gives you a gigantic backlog of games, as well as any first-party titles released on Xbox on day one. You get it included as part of the Game Pass. Xbox, PS5 doesn't have something like that at the moment. They've got PS Now, which unfortunately is not available in South Africa. It's also a subscription-based streaming service.
Okay.
But they have the massive exclusives that are coming up later in the year. So they've got, the God of Wars, the Horizon Zero Dawns,
Last of Us,
Naughty Dog, whatever Naughty Dog brings.
Whatever Naughty Dog touches, I'm playing. You know what I mean?
That stuff is gold.
But also Miles Morales, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later in the show. Miles Morales is the new Spider-Man game, of course. And if you guys don't know anything about Spider-Man, he is a character in the Spider-Man universe, in the multiverse, and he actually is Spider-Man in the multiverse. And if you haven't watched Into the Spider-Verse, you have to watch that film. It's one of the greatest films ever made, and this game kind of falls in line with that.
Awesome. And yeah, we'll show that later. In my opinion, Miles Morales is probably the best launch title on any of the consoles at the moment. It's fantastic. It displays the console's hardware capabilities brilliantly.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we haven't spoken about, just because the console is 4K doesn't mean that you can't play it on your TV. You just don't get 4K on your TV. There are other features that it can support. So, for instance, there's a mode called Performance Mode, which gives the console the ability to output 120 frames a second at that resolution, which is amazing. And if you've never ever used 120 frames a second on a console, you are missing out. Like I do a lot of PC gaming and I play at really high frame rates. It just gives you a competitive advantage, especially in games like FIFA, where you're playing online. It just gives you those extra little frames. But again, you need a TV to support or see that. So if you are thinking about getting a new next-gen console now, start thinking about saving up for a TV that does support those features, and do some Googling for yourself to find out a TV that does, and educate yourself on that, which is really cool. So we are going to be coming back with Miles Morales and Spider-Man, which is really cool, which is really sick, which I'm really excited. So stay with us. We've got some more amazing gaming content on the way.